Evelyn Grant felt the first cut before she heard the words. The ballroom's golden brilliance, which only moments ago had seemed almost merciful in its warmth, shifted into a shimmering battlefield of glances, smirks, and whispered condemnations. She knew the sound of a gathering storm. She had lived beneath its shadow for 3 years. Yet nothing prepared her for the hush that slid across the room as Lady Melbridge's jeweled hand froze mid-gesture. Her gaze locked upon the sapphire necklace at Evelyn's throat. The woman's fan snapped shut with a whisper sharp as a blade. "How curious," she murmured, loudly enough for half the ballroom to hear, "that a country baronet's daughter should wear the hawthorn sapphires." Dozens of heads turned. The chandeliers glowed too brightly, their cold light striking the sapphire's deep blue fire like an accusation. Evelyn kept her chin lifted, though every nerve inside her recoiled. Her borrowed gown, modest but elegant, suddenly felt like a costume she had no right to wear. The necklace, the Duke's mother's necklace, rested against her skin with a weight that did not feel like silk or metal, but destiny. A whisper spiraled through the guests. Stolen. Surely not. Unless she was invited to wear it. Impossible. She was the girl from Almack's, was she not? The scandalous one. Yes. That one. Evelyn swallowed the ache rising in her throat. She had survived gossip before. She had endured far worse than a ballroom scrutiny. But the cruelty of polite society lay not in its shouts, but in its murmurs, gentle voices tipped with poison, hidden behind fans and polite smiles. Tonight, every whisper seemed crafted to reopen wounds she had fought to seal. Across the room, she sensed him before she saw him. Duke Alastair Hawthorne. His name, spoken only in quiet corners for 3 winters, now echoed silently in her pulse. He stood at the entrance, freshly arrived, tall and composed in black and silver. His presence parted the crowd as effortlessly as a command. Evelyn dared one glance at him. It was enough. His gaze had already fallen upon her. Shock flickered across his features, swift and unmistakable, breaking the cool detachment that had become his armor since the scandal. His eyes, winter-gray, steady, impossible to outrun, locked onto the necklace, then lifted to meet hers. For a heartbeat, the ballroom vanished. The whispers dissolved. The years between them collapsed into a breath of memory, a garden at twilight, a forbidden touch, a kiss that had cost her everything. Alastair began moving, measured and certain, every step cutting through the sea of silk and murmurs. People made way instinctively. Some bowed, some stiffened, all watched. Evelyn's spine straightened despite the tremor in her fingertips. Lady Melbridge curtsied with exaggerated grace. "Your Grace," she said sweetly, "you might be interested to know that Lady Grant wears a rather familiar piece." The Duke did not look at her. He stopped directly before Evelyn, his presence enveloping her like a tide. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but resonant, a voice made for command. "Lady Grant," he said, "may I ask who entrusted you with this necklace?" The question was not an accusation, but the ballroom heard it as one. Evelyn fought to keep her voice steady. "It arrived by post, Your Grace. 3 days ago. There was no note, no signature. I assumed." "You assumed it was sent in earnest," Lady Melbridge cut in, forced sweetness crumbling. "Or perhaps you hoped it might stir old stories back to life." A ripple of laughter followed. Evelyn's cheeks burned, though she refused to look away from the Duke. She needed him to hear truth from her own mouth, not from the cold tongues of London. Alastair turned his head slowly, with the calm of a man accustomed to commands being obeyed. "Lady Melbridge," he said, "if any lady here believes I would entrust my mother's jewels to one unworthy, she may step forward and question me directly." A stunned silence fell. Evelyn's breath caught. The Duke rarely spoke impulsively. His caution was known, his restraint almost maddening. But now he stood beside her, not distant, not silent, but protective, publicly, dangerously, undeniably. After a long, brittle pause, he extended his arm to her. "Lady Grant," he said quietly, "will you walk with me?" The ballroom erupted, not in noise, but in sharpened curiosity. Such a gesture was not neutral. For a woman with a tarnished reputation, it was nothing short of a declaration. Evelyn hesitated, pulse thundering. His arm, strong and steady, waited. He did not look away. 3 winters ago, she had begged him, with hope, with innocence, to choose her. He had not. Tonight, without explanation, he offered something far more perilous, his public support. She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. A gasp rippled through the guests like wind over ice. Evelyn's breath shivered at the warmth of his arm beneath her palm. The Duke guided her through the parted crowd with a composure she could not match. Her heart hammered. She felt exposed, carried by a mixture of dread and fragile relief. The sapphire pendant glinted with every step, a jewel of ruined years and impossible memories. Just as they reached the edge of the ballroom, a tall, broad-shouldered gentleman stepped into their path. Lord Redford, a man known for his bluntness and inconvenient honesty, cleared his throat with a gravity that sliced the air. "Your Grace," he murmured, "I would not intrude if the matter were trivial." But the hawthorn vault was opened 3 nights past. The sapphire necklace, his eyes dropped pointedly to Evelyn's throat, was reported missing. Evelyn's hand tightened involuntarily on the Duke's arm. Alistair's jaw clenched, a storm gathering beneath his composed exterior. Redford lowered his voice further. Whoever placed it upon her did not wish to remain hidden. Evelyn's pulse stumbled. The Duke's expression darkened, not in anger at her, but at the unseen hands steering their fates. For the first time that night, fear pierced her composure. She whispered, barely audible, "What does this mean?" Alistair's answer was soft but unyielding. "It means our past," he said, "is no longer content to remain buried." And as the ballroom's murmurs swelled behind them, Evelyn understood. Tonight's humiliation was only the beginning. The whispers had not followed them into the corridor, but Evelyn felt them clinging to her like frost on skin. The Duchess of Devonshire's ballroom lay behind them, radiant and merciless, yet the corridor ahead, lined with portraits and dimmed candle sconces, offered no true refuge. The Duke's silence weighed as heavily as the questions she dared not ask. His stride, measured and purposeful, betrayed nothing of the turmoil she sensed beneath his composed exterior. Only when they reached a secluded antechamber overlooking the snow-covered gardens did he stop. The frostbright moon poured light across his features, softening the austerity that society so admired and she once feared she understood too well. Evelyn kept her hands clasped before her, unwilling to touch the necklace that lay against her collarbones like a brand. "Has it caused you pain?" Alistair finally asked. His voice was low, almost hesitant, and for a moment she wondered if he meant the necklace or the night itself. Evelyn drew a steadying breath. "Pain is not new to me, Your Grace. I have learned to endure it without spectacle." His eyes flickered, an expression she had never been allowed to witness openly. "You think I brought you here to watch you endure more?" She said nothing. Silence had become her safest armor. Alistair stepped closer, but not enough to breach propriety. "3 nights ago," he began carefully, "the hawthorn vault was disturbed. Nothing else was taken. Not a single jewel, not a coin. Only this necklace." Evelyn's heart tightened. "And you think someone sent it to me to wound you?" His jaw tensed at her phrasing. "To wound us both." The words struck like a blow. She had not expected him to place her within that equation. Their past belonged to her suffering far more than his. "I should have sent it back the moment I saw it," she murmured. "You should have told me," he corrected softly. 3 years ago, you bore the weight alone. I will not have you bear it again." Evelyn's throat threatened to close. Her memories of him, of tenderness, of quiet laughter in the gardens of Almack's, of a kiss stolen under moonlight, collided violently with the pain that had followed. "I did write to you," she whispered. "After the scandal. I believed you would want to know the truth." Alistair inhaled sharply. "I never received a letter." She lifted her gaze. "I sent 3. The Duke froze, realization slicing through him like a blade. Someone had stood between them even then. Before he could respond, hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lord Redford emerged, breathing with the urgency of a man who disliked haste yet had been forced into it. His gaze moved from the Duke to Evelyn, then to the necklace that glimmered like stolen starlight. "I have spoken with the steward, Your Grace. Redford announced quietly. "There is something you must hear. The vault was opened using your late father's signet." Alastair went still. Evelyn felt the atmosphere shift, gravity deepening like a storm descending. "My father's signet remains locked in your private study," Redford finished grimly. "Which means either someone within Hawthorne House has betrayed you, or someone has been granted access you did not authorize." Evelyn's stomach tightened. Treachery, whispers, stolen heirlooms. This was no longer the simple cruelty of gossip. This was targeted, deliberate, timed with her return to London. Alastair dismissed Redford with a curt nod, though his voice remained steady. "Tell no one more than is necessary." When the Earl departed, the Duke turned back to Evelyn. "I do not believe in coincidence," he murmured. "Not when it concerns you." Her breath faltered at the intensity in his eyes. "And yet," she replied softly, "our entire history feels like one misstep of fate after another." He exhaled, a sound threaded with regret. "Evelyn, if I had known, if those letters had reached me, everything would have changed. You must believe that." She longed to. A part of her, buried beneath years of disappointment, still ached to trust the boy he had been, the man he might be now. But longing and truth were not always aligned. "Belief is a fragile thing, Your Grace," she said. "Easily broken, hard to mend." He stepped closer, the air tightening between them. "Then allow me to mend it." Evelyn's pulse fluttered with dangerous hope. But before she could speak, he gently reached toward the necklace, not to remove it, but to lift the sapphire pendant just enough for its facets to catch the candlelight. "This necklace," he said quietly, "was meant for my future Duchess. My mother insisted it be given only to the woman I would trust with my legacy and my heart." The admission struck her breathless. It felt like a confession wrapped in centuries of expectation. "Then surely," she whispered, "I am the last woman who should wear it." His fingers released the pendant slowly, lingering in the space between them. "Or the only woman," he murmured, "who ever should have." Her eyes widened, but he held up a hand gently, as if to slow the moment. "I am not asking for an answer. Not tonight. But you must know this. Whoever placed that necklace upon you intends to manipulate our past. I refuse to let them decide our future." Evelyn felt a tremor run through her. Not fear, but something far more perilous. "Then what do you propose?" "That we discover the truth together." "Together?" she echoed. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of humility she had never imagined from the Duke of Hawthorne. "If you will allow it." Her breath stirred in the stillness between them. Snow pressed against the windows, muffling the world. Somewhere, music drifted faintly from the ballroom, a waltz she once dreamed of dancing with him. "Very well," she said at last, her voice steady though her heart thundered. "We will uncover the truth. Together." Relief flickered across his features, a quiet, unguarded emotion that softened the severity of his expression. "Thank you," he whispered. But before the warmth of their fragile accord could settle, a soft knock came at the door. A footman entered with a silver tray, upon which lay a single folded card sealed with crimson wax. "For Lady Grant," the young man said. Evelyn's heart lurched. The seal bore no crest she recognized. Alastair moved closer, protective instinct flaring. "Open it," he said softly. With a steady breath, Evelyn broke the seal. The message inside was written in elegant, chilling script. "Wear the necklace. He owes you far more than reputation." Alastair read it over her shoulder, his jaw tightening with dangerous resolve. "This is no mere scandal," he said quietly. "Someone is playing a game they do not understand." Evelyn folded the note, her fear replaced by iron. "Then let us show them," she said, "that we are not so easily moved." Alastair met her gaze, pride and something deeper burning in his eyes. "Then tonight," he murmured, "is no longer about the past." And for the first time in 3 winters, Evelyn felt the faintest spark of hope. Every sentence drives plot or deepens character. The corridor outside the retiring room held a stillness that did not belong to a house filled with music. It was the sort of hush one found in the moments before a confession, when breath and courage tangled together beneath the ribs. Evelyn stepped into that silence, one hand pressed to her throat as if to keep the Duke's mother's necklace from trembling against her skin. She did not hear footsteps behind her until his shadow overtook her own. When she turned, she found Alastair Hawthorne standing several paces away, his expression carved from restraint and something far more dangerous to her peace. "You should not have followed me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I could not allow you to walk away a second time," he replied, and the softness in his tone unsettled her far more than anger ever could. Evelyn looked past him, toward the distant glow of the chandeliers spilling onto polished floors. "We both know nothing good comes from being alone together. Not any more." "That is precisely why we must speak," he insisted. "3 winters of silence have not undone what happened in that garden, nor what it cost you." His words pried at the wound she had tried to bury. "What it cost me," she whispered. "My mother cried for weeks. My father spent months correcting whispers. I was paraded before every eligible gentleman as though my reputation were mere fabric to be mended with a proper thread. And you," her voice strained, "you vanished." Alastair closed the distance between them with careful, deliberate steps, as though approaching a frightened creature he feared scattering. "I left because they demanded it. My uncle, my advisers, even the Crown's own representatives reminded me of duty, lineage, alliances. I thought removing myself was the one thing that would spare you further disgrace. It only confirmed the rumors." Her hands tightened. "They said I must have thrown myself at you. That no lady would be alone with a duke unless she intended manipulation. And I believed avoiding you would protect you," he murmured, a bitter edge in his voice. "I should have defied them all." The admission unsettled her more than any denial could have. She steadied herself with a single breath. "And tonight? Does duty still rule you?" His gaze dropped briefly to the glimmering sapphire at her throat. "Tonight, duty is the reason I cannot leave you standing here as though none of this matters." Her fingers brushed the necklace unconsciously. "Then tell me how this ended up around my neck. Tell me why something meant for your future Duchess was delivered to me with no note, no explanation." "That is what I came to discover," he said, and Evelyn caught the faint tremor of frustration beneath his calm exterior. "I locked the case myself years ago. Only my steward possessed a key. Yet when I confronted him, he swore the necklace had been taken by someone under my household's banner." A chill swept through her. "So it was stolen?" "Not merely stolen," Alastair said quietly. "Placed. Intentionally. By someone who understood precisely what it would imply." Evelyn's breath stilled. "Another scandal. And one that now endangers you far more than it does me." His jaw tightened. "There were eyes upon you the moment you stepped into the ballroom. Some saw only the daughter of a declining baronet daring to flaunt a duke's heirloom. Others saw a woman attempting to bind me by public expectation." "Which I would never do," she said sharply. "I know." His voice gentled. "Which is why we must determine who would benefit from such an illusion." The implication unsettled her. She drew back slightly, though he did not reach for her. "You speak as though this evening were orchestrated." "Events such as these rarely occur by chance," he answered. "And yet," his hesitation was brief but telling, "I cannot deny the sight of you tonight shook something in me I had sworn to silence." Evelyn's heart lurched painfully. "Do not say things simply because the hour feels fragile." "I say them because 3 winters of pretending indifference has exhausted every lie I told myself," he said, the words low and unguarded. "And because seeing you wear my mother's necklace, whether by design or mischief, forced me to confront what I abandoned." Her breath caught. "Alastair." "No," he stepped closer, the nearness warming the cold edges of the corridor. "Let me speak plainly at least once. You deserved more than vanishing correspondence and political excuses. You deserved a man who fought for you. You were that man," she whispered, "before fear and duty stole you away." His eyes softened in a way that threatened to break her entirely. "Then allow me, tonight, to be him again." The air tightened between them, charged with unspoken longing. Evelyn felt the pull of him, familiar yet painfully new. And though her heart urged her toward him, the world beyond the corridor pressed its cold hand upon her shoulder. "Even if you mean that," she said, forcing steadiness into her tone, "the Ton will never forgive a second scandal. Nor will they believe my innocence this time." "They will," he said, "if I stand beside you." "And if you cannot?" she asked softly. "If your title chains you once more?" He held her gaze with a quiet intensity that stripped away every layer of pretense. "Then I will fight the chain." A tremor passed through her, a dangerous, hopeful tremor she feared almost as much as she desired it. "Why now?" she asked. "Why after all this time?" "Because the sight of you tonight reminded me that I have lived 3 winters without warmth," he said. "And I cannot endure a 4th. Her pulse fluttered, unsteady and disobedient. She looked down, unable to bear the full force of his gaze. His hand lifted as though to touch her, then paused inches from her cheek, the restraint speaking of a deeper respect than any gesture he might have completed. "If you step away," he murmured, "I will not pursue. But if you stay, then let us face what comes." The music from the ballroom drifted faintly into the quiet, a slow, wistful melody that echoed the aching uncertainty between them. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, weighing fear against longing, propriety against truth. When she opened them, she found Alistair watching her with a hope so fragile it tightened her throat. Slowly, very slowly, she placed her hand in his. A breath escaped him, almost a vow. He bowed his head, touching her fingers to his lips with a reverence that undid her remaining composure. "Then it begins," he whispered. Evelyn did not know if he meant the investigation, the risk, or the rekindling of something neither had truly buried. But as he led her back toward the light, she understood one thing with startling clarity. Whatever waited in the ballroom, whatever shadows had orchestrated her humiliation, she would not face them alone. Not this winter. Not ever again.